Well, hey, it's good to be back with you this weekend. Last weekend, I was not here. Missed you guys, but my coach, he told me as we were moving in the process of searching for a children's pastor, he told me to call up one of the largest churches in the United States and ask if they would host us in a children's ministry vision tour. And so last weekend, a couple of board members and their spouses and I, we were suffering in Southern California. Man, it was hot. Whew. And no, really, though, we spent the weekend at this highly influential church, and I have to tell you, it was so good. They, a lot of times it's easy to think, oh, large churches, they're just so uppity and so full of themselves. They were not, man. They opened up, they shared with us, they poured into us, they taught us, and they just, so encouraging. I'll tell you more about it if you ask me later, but it's good to be with us. And hey, I so appreciate Lauren bringing a word last week. The timing of the trip came up pretty quick, and I asked him and said, hey, wrap up our Stress to Rest series, and he did, right? Because in the end, you find rest in Jesus. In the end, you find rest when you let Jesus take away resentments and find healing in Christ. So thank you for sharing. We have a good team to work with. Hey, I'll tell you in a minute what we're going to do today, but next weekend, especially, mark it on your calendars. Whatever you have planned next Sunday morning, cancel it and mark it in your calendar to be here, especially because two big things next week. First of all, we're going to start a brand new series, and I know you think preachers are always excited about their new series that they're starting, but this is something our whole staff has been working on for several months now. The reality is spirituality, there's no magic, there's no silver bullet. There's no one magical thing but if there was one, this would be pretty high up there. That we've discovered what really makes a difference in a lifelong, lasting faith or folks who fall away, a lot of times hinges on this one thing to learn. And so we're going to do it. We're going to practice it as a church family and help us to develop some new habits that are really helpful. We've got a free gift for everybody who comes next Sunday, and hopefully we've ordered enough. But if you don't come Sunday, we might run out and you won't get one. Be a part of it that has a purpose to help us with it. So make sure you're here for that. Then next Sunday, we'll also start to share publicly and to roll out some really exciting news of some big changes we have coming up. And they're exciting. I shared a little bit of them. I kind of gave a sneak peek to our senior adults on Wednesday. They were excited. They clapped. And let me tell you, when senior adults are excited about change, you know it's good. And so is that okay, Hallie? Is that okay to say? I don't mean that. I don't mean any disrespect by that.
We celebrate almost every.
Well, I know you guys are awesome. So you're going to want to hear about it. I'm not going to even hint and let the cat out of the bag now. Just you better come back. It's going to be exciting. So that's next Sunday. Today we had this one Sunday, and I just said, Lord, what is it today? And a little bit from our experiences last weekend and a little bit of thinking of what the future is for us. This is what I feel like we need to have a candid conversation today. We're going to talk a little bit about church. If you're a guest today, and here's what we're going to do. We kind of pull back the curtain a little bit and talk about what it means to be a good, healthy church that Jesus wants us to be. And you'll kind of see a little bit of how we think and how I think of what church looks like. Because I know that church really isn't all that popular these days. In our popular culture, church and church leaders and organized religion is really taking a lot of hits. A lot of folks who would say, man, I love Jesus, I just don't like the church, and so I can follow Jesus but not be engaged in the church. But what we find from Jesus is it doesn't work that way. That when you're a follower of Jesus, you're a part of his body. You're part of the church. A lot of folks are a part of the body, but they're inactive, they're gone, they're missing, and can't be a part of fully functioning church as Jesus wants us to be. We want to be a good church. We want to be a healthy church. We want to be a church that Jesus can be proud of. Unfortunately, some things that churches do, not always intentionally, but I know Jesus is always very proud of us. So we got to work hard at being the church, the body, to be faithful to who Jesus wants us to be. We're going to talk a little bit about that today. I don't know what all of your story is, but a lot of my story involves growing up in church. And we were the family that we were there every Sunday, every time the doors were open. We were there Sunday school before church started and sticking around for church after that. And maybe there was a potluck dinner. We stuck around for that. We went home, got a little nap. We came back on Sunday night because we didn't get enough church Sunday morning. We came back for the 6 o'clock service. And then on Wednesday night, we came back again for whatever the activity was then, whether it was little kids scouting thing and prayer meeting or whatever it may be. And if there was something on Thursday night, man, we were there. Work day on Saturday, we were there all the time. I didn't mind, though. It was my family. It was my extended family and friends and people who had an impact on my life. So the church we grew up in, I can remember a couple of stories, right, of these impactful moments and people. The church I grew up in was a lot smaller than our church here, and we kind of had two main spaces, the sanctuary worship space and then a multi-purpose space that was opened up for, dinners and things like that. But then for Sunday school, we didn't have like classes, and so we would take these big dividers and we would set them out and kind of partition off the little classroom areas. Now, they weren't the super cool like accordion style, just folding and they hang from the ceiling. We got a couple of those around here. They were just these big ones that you would move them, and they were almost as wide as a grown man could carry, but you'd kind of carry it and put it in place and put all the classrooms together. And at the bottom of the divider, there was about a 12-inch space because it didn't go all the way to the floor, which when you're like 7 years old is an invitation to crawl under it. And we did regularly. And for like the little like nursery kids who are not babies, but the toddler nurseries, they saw it as an opportunity to roll under it, right? And so we'd be sitting there in third grade Sunday school class, and here comes a toddler rolling right through the class, and there's a teacher, toddler on the loose, and the teacher's running around trying to find him. So eventually the guys figured out we got to do something about this, and they cut some boards and screwed them onto the bottom of those dividers, and those were like the toddler nursery dividers to keep the toddlers from rolling through your class, Well, the dividers, they were portable, which was nice, until my friend and I in Sunday school class said, hey, did you watch Hulk Hogan last night? Did you see the moves he was doing? And we'd get bored a little bit in Sunday school classes. That's what 6-year-old kids do. And we'd start wrestling with each other in class. Yeah, I was one of those kids who was wrestling, and the teacher's like, knock it off, get back here, but Hulk Hogan. So we're wrestling, and okay, good, and we're wrestling around one day, and it got like a little bit out of hand, and I kind of pushed my friend Paulie into the divider, and the whole thing came over and pretty much fell out into the hallway where there were a bunch of people standing there and a bunch of adults, especially Jess. I remember Jess. He was about like 9 feet tall, big, broad shoulders, linebacker. He had 3 boys, and they were all tall, strong. Grew up in Minnesota. They all played hockey, right? And you just did not want to get cross-checked from one of those guys. They were big, tall, strong. And Jess, he's the dad. He's got a big booming voice because that's how you take care of big, strong, strapping boys as well. And I just remember, this is etched in my mind forever, laying on top of the overturned divider, looking up, and there's Jess. What are you boys doing? Wrestling in church, causing a ruckus, unsafe. I'm scared to death. Is like he's gonna, kill me here with one finger. But that's what happens with the people in our lives, right? They make an impact, and that moment made an impact. And I knew Jess was a great guy, and looking back, I was the unruly kid wrestling, knocking the dividers over. I deserved it, right? But that moment stuck with me because people and events have an impact in our life. You think of that word impact, right? If a meteor flies out of the sky, hits the earth, it makes an impact. And the dirt is moved and pushed out of the way, and the earth is permanently changed at the point of impact. And that's what people do to our lives. Interactions with significant people in significant moments leave an impact, and we're forever changed. Hopefully, those are good experiences. Hopefully they are good impacts. Sadly enough, let's just be honest, okay? Because it's important to be honest in church. Sometimes churches and church people have left very negative, hurtful, even abusive impacts in our lives. And I've heard stories of too many people who carry the hurts and pains of a negative, hurtful impact of someone from a church. Now, thankfully, those stories are not in the majority, but we don't want any of them. It's the power of impact. I think also of Tony. Tony was the junior high and senior high Sunday school teacher. Everybody was all together in one Sunday school, right? Tony, I'm not sure that Tony looked at the Sunday school lesson until about 30 seconds before he walked in the room. But somehow he was able to make a lesson out of it, and we all had a great time and kind of learned something. But Tony, over 6 years of 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, faithfully serving every Sunday in Sunday school, he made an impact on us. He was also pretty cool because sometimes he'd say, you know what, I think we should have Sunday school at McDonald's. Let's all hop into my minivan and 12 of us would find a place to sit and we'd drive to McDonald's, you know? I know it was before like the whole safety security thing and we probably should have, but you know, when you're 12, it's like, yeah, I'll sit in the back on the floor with somebody on top of me. We drive those. My favorite Sunday schools at McDonald's, you know? And again, I don't know if I remember the specific lessons. I remember one really specific lesson he shared with us. But the impact Tony had on our lives was that every Sunday he showed up week after week after week, and he taught us what he knew. He influenced us. He prayed for us. He encouraged us to follow Jesus. When I go back home, visit my mom and dad, and if we're there over a Sunday, we go to my church, Tony every time will come and we'll talk and we'll share. And now it's two adults talking with each other. But Tony left a lifelong impact on my life, and I am forever changed and better because of it. And when we followers of Jesus are doing what Jesus wants us to do, that's what we get to be a part of. And what we're going to talk about today is that not only have we been impacted, hopefully for good, by the church and church people, but now it's our turn as adults to be that person. Could it be that in the future somebody will share a story about you and the impact that you made on their lives because you were there and you cared? You showed up regularly. You loved them. You made an impact on their lives. I haven't told you stories of pastors. I've told you stories of regular old people just like you who worked regular old jobs and had a significant impact because they gave of themselves. They invested in people, and I got to be the recipient of that. That's when the church is operating at its best. And that's what Jesus has encouraged us to be. When I came here, folks asked, especially in the interview process, what's your vision? What's your plan? And one of the things I said a couple of times around was that, well, I don't yet have a specific vision because my plan is to come, to be here, and I'm going to take the first year not to make a bunch of changes, but to listen. And I want to hear your stories. I want to hear the best of who Ridgefield Nazarene has been in the past. I want to hear some of the hard stories as well and some of the times when we haven't been at our best because we need to be honest with who we are. And I want to hear stories. And now, having been here a little over a year, we're starting to move into the future. We're starting to make some changes. But as I've been thinking about that and saying, Lord, what's the vision you have for our church and who you want us to be? He has shown me something really interesting. That as I've heard stories, I've not so much heard stories about programs and events and buildings as much as I've heard stories of people. I've heard lots of stories of the singing tree, and here in just a little over a month or so, there's going to be a big giant tree because we believe in doing it big here, right? And celebrating Christmas in a big way, and then it's going to become alive, like literally. You'll see. You just got to check it out. I've heard stories of 39. This year will be 40 years of a singing Christmas tree, but I haven't heard stories of a tree. I've heard stories of people. I've heard stories of Terry leading, encouraging. The people enjoyed his ministry impact. I've heard stories of how people love to come and sing and be a part of the tree, and they love being led by Sadie, influenced by Sadie. I've heard stories of how a group of guys can come and on a Saturday morning assemble and build the whole tree, and this guy named Tim who knows where every bolt goes, and he had an accident at work a couple of months ago, and we're kind of wondering how we're going to put the whole thing together because people make a difference in our lives. People make an impact in our lives. I've heard stories of how Frida, just being Frida, shares a verse from the Bible of encouragement, which is just what somebody needs to hear, and she doesn't even know that later on her husband Mike is going to bring a sermon on that same exact passage, and it was just what that person needed. I've heard stories of people available to God and God working powerfully through them. I remember one gathering, there was a group of men, and I heard story after story after story of grown-up men saying, when I was a little boy, I came to this church. And I was one of those wrestling and knocking over dividers, knocking holes in the wall, climbing out the windows, and Pastor Steve loved me and cared for me. And now we're grown up, have kids of their own. sharing stories of the power of God who gets involved in a person's life and changes a person's life and changes their family tree, and generations are different because of what God has done through people. And someone else says, yeah, when I was a kid, Pastor Steve, he loved me. And when I was a kid, Pastor Steve, he loved me. And now their parents bringing their kids back because that's what God does as he works through people. So as we move forward, we're going to focus on people way more than programs. There's some work for us to do, though. We're going to talk about that today. Because one of the really important elements of living out our faith is how we treat each other. What we're going to hear today is a story in the life of Jesus that he takes a powerful event, an impactful event, and he turns it into a lesson, and he says, now, imitate what I've done. So take your Bibles, if you have them, open to John chapter 13, or take your phone and shut down Facebook, open up your Bible app, and swipe your way over to John chapter 13 is where we're going to be, or we'll just put it up on the screen if that is the best way for you to engage it as well, and I'll read it. But here's what's going to happen in this story, right? So Jesus is with his disciples. It's just a short time before he will be arrested, tried, crucified, then will raise again, then be ascended into heaven. So things are going to change very drastically. Jesus knows that, and now he does something that leaves a permanent impact in their lives that they'll never forget. Okay, so here's the story, starting in verse 1 of John chapter 13. It was just before the Passover festival. Jesus knew that the hour had come for him to leave this world and to go to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. He loved them, and he shows it right here. The evening meal was in progress. The devil had already prompted Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot, to betray Jesus. Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power. And we got to stop here. It's easy to read through this and just kind of like, oh yeah, I know that part. You got to know what was in Jesus' mind that led up to what happens next, okay? So what was Jesus' sense of self and his self-consciousness? Here it is right here, okay? Look at this. Verse 3. Jesus knew that God the Father had put all things under his power. Jesus knew that God had put everything under his own power. You realize how grand of a statement that is, right? That he was at the top of the organizational chart. That he sat in the seat and place and position of power, that what he wanted was going to happen. He had power over everyone, everything, and he knew it. And he knew that he had come from God and was returning to God. He had in his mind memories of being with God the Father in the throne room of heaven from all of creation, and that he had created everything, including these men right in front of him, and that he, in a little while, was going to go back to the Father. He would be seated at the right hand of the Father with the angels in heaven surrounding him, where he would be worshipped as God and King of the universe. Knowing that, with that in his mind, this is what he does. Verse 4, so with all that in mind, he got up from the meal. He took off his outer clothing and wrapped a towel around his waist. After that, he poured water into a basin and began to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with the towel that was wrapped around him. You're like, oh yeah, foot washing, okay, I get it. Well, let me just make sure you really understand here. So, they're in Jerusalem, and they had rented this room for them to be able to celebrate the Passover, a common Jewish feast. Some of you have celebrated a Passover meal here at our church family. However, the Passover was not usually celebrated at church or synagogue in a large gathering around round tables in a gymnasium. It was usually celebrated in homes with an extended family. And Jesus and his disciples, they're down in Jerusalem, and so their homes aren't there, and so they have to find a place, and they rent a room to have this significant religious worship time together, the Passover. And so anybody who had owned a larger home and maybe had an extra room, or maybe they had a patio room up on top of their house, they would rent out their extra room for people to celebrate the Passover if they were in Jerusalem celebrating. And so Jesus sends, a little bit before, he sends his disciples, he says, go make preparations, rent out a room, get everything we need, get ready. Well, they go, they rent out the room, they get ready. Someone forgot to make sure that a servant was included in the deal. It was probably Peter. He just was didn't read the contract, signed it, paid the money, and never read the fine print. And Jesus is duh, servant, washing, because You need a servant to wash people's feet. They wore sandals. They walked in the dirt. It was sweaty. And you put like feet and sweat and dirt. I'm not even going any further. That's just nasty, right? And so you hired a servant or made sure that a servant was there to wash everyone's feet so that it didn't smell like a locker room halfway through the meal. Well, they forgot to hire the servant. There was no servant. They get halfway through the meal, and it probably got awkward. Somebody had to recognize it, like, oh, nobody's washed the feet. We forgot to get the servant. And like, I'm not doing that. It's nasty. And Peter, James, John, guys who are going to write the Bible, they're like, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. Thaddeus, you got a funny name. You wash everybody's feet. I don't know. Nobody would do it. And in the middle of the meal, Jesus gets up, wraps a towel around his waist, gets down on the ground, pours water into a basin. I can imagine it got really quiet. And everybody's thinking, oh, man. This whole time I've been wondering who was going to do it, thinking Thaddeus should because I'm not willing. And Jesus, the Messiah, the King, the teacher, the rabbi, our leader, is going to wash our feet. You think it got awkward? Yeah. So Peter speaks up, right? Because he's the one who said what everybody else was thinking, but he just says it. Look at verse 6. He came to Simon Peter, who was with him. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, Lord, are you going to wash my feet? Yeah, I've washed everybody else's. Jesus replied, look, you don't realize now what I'm doing, but later you'll understand. No, said Peter, you shall never wash my feet. And Jesus said, bro, look, let me be in charge of this, okay? You weren't willing, I'm doing it, just sit here and be quiet, let me teach you a lesson, okay? No, that's not what Jesus said. He says, look, unless I wash you, you have no part with me. Just trust me with this, Peter. Verse 9, then Lord, Simon replied, not just my feet, wash my hands and my head as well. And Jesus is like, man, we just be quiet and let me have this moment. Let me be in charge here. So verse 10, Jesus answered, those who have had a bath, they only need to wash their feet. You took a bath this morning, you're good. Just let me wash your feet. Be quiet. Let me teach you the lesson I want you to learn. Their whole body's clean. You're clean, though not every one of you. For he knew who was going to betray him. That's why he said not everyone was clean. And he's like, let's get back to the lesson. Just pay attention here. Verse 12, when he had finished washing their feet, he put on his clothes and he returned to his place. It's still pretty quiet. Still pretty awkward. We've all screwed up. What's Jesus going to say? Do you understand what I have done for you? He asked them. You call me teacher and Lord. Lord means master, right? And that is what I am. So now that I, your Lord and your teacher, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet. Now that the master has washed the servant's feet, it's an object lesson for how I want you to live. Now that the teacher has stooped to wash the student's feet, that's how I want you to live. I have set for you an example that you should do as I have done for you. Very truly, I tell you, no servant is greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. Since I, your master, have washed your feet, you go wash other people's feet. Since you're the messenger and I'm the one who sends you, and I've washed your feet, you go wash feet or do whatever it takes for everyone else. And he says, do you realize what has just happened here? We think of greatness in terms of having the chair or the seat of power, and everybody serves the person who is in the seat of power. And there's a part of all of us that we want the position. We want that chair, right? Well, not when we're in a church. We say, oh, I'm humble. But really, we want the seat of power and influence. We want to be served because that's success. That would feel good. And Jesus, the one who rightfully has the seat of power, gets up from the seat of power, literally gets down on the floor and washes their feet. Now, this in a culture that is very stratified, where their culture of shame and honor, where it was not only a thing of humility for a master to serve the servants, but it was humiliation. It was putting yourself in a place of shame and of dishonor for the master to serve the servants. And Jesus himself, the ultimate master of everyone, gets down and serves. And Jesus says, you want to see greatness? Do you want a definition of greatness? Is when the person who sits in the seat of honor gets down and does the serving instead of being served. Real leadership is when the leader gets down and serves everyone who we think should be serving him. Jesus says, now that you know these things, you are blessed if you do them. That's where we end up. Let me look at the power of this last verse. Because we like to talk about servanthood as like an attitude. I'm going to have the attitude of a servant. Make me a servant, humble and true. We sing about it, right? It's a good worship song. Because it's an attitude, which kind of lets us off the hook from actually doing anything sometimes. And Jesus says, you're blessed if you do them. Because servanthood, yes, it's an attitude, but the attitude means nothing if the action is missing. He says, let's turn servanthood into a verb and let's start serving. You're blessed if you do them. So here's what I think Jesus would ask us today. He says, you call yourselves mine. You call me a follower of Jesus. You call yourselves a follower of Jesus. Where are you getting down on the floor to serve someone? You call yourself a follower of Jesus? Jesus says, show me how you're serving. Show me where you're serving. You're blessed if you do it. Serving is a verb. Now at this point, it can be really easy for a pastor to say, all right, let's do this. We got to wash each other's feet and pick someone from the crowd and take your socks and shoes off. We're going to wash feet to show. And that would be weird because that's not what we do. We have no cultural connection for foot washing, right? Because sometimes it's easier to wash feet than to do the real foot washing in our own cultures. We're not going to do that. That'd be weird. We have no cultural context. Let's talk about what foot washing really looks like in our culture, what it means to really, truly serve. So we said we're going to talk about church today. Well, here's one of the ways we talk about what we ask of folks to do. What do we believe a person should do as a part of a church, as a part of a follower of Jesus? Next weekend, we're going to do membership class. I hope you've signed up for it, just to learn more. In our membership class, here's the 30-second version of what we're going to really expand and talk through the whole class. We talk in terms of being a 3C Christian. And if you'll do these three things, that leads to a balanced, healthy Christian life, right? So the first one at the top is celebrate. That is when we gather to worship every weekend, we celebrate what God has done. We celebrate that God is King. You've experienced some of that today, and it's been good, right? We celebrate what God is doing. He's good. But it doesn't end there. We say in the bottom left-hand side, the second C is to connect. Because it's important for us to connect with each other, to build relationships with each other. And it's kind of hard to do that when you show up for an hour and you're sitting in rows looking at the backs of heads listening to one person talk. There's times this is important, but then we need to have times where we gather in smaller groupings of people where everyone can talk and share, where we can sit in circles and look at faces and everybody talks and shares together. And so that looks like a Bible study group. That looks like a Sunday school class, maybe during the 9 o'clock hour here at church. Looks like an accountability group. Looks like a Bible study at the coffee shop, a prayer group, whatever the different format looks like, a smaller grouping of people where everybody talks and shares and gets to know each other, encourages each other. We build real relationships with each other. The one we're going to talk about today is the bottom right-hand side, the third C, and that is contribute, which is not just giving your money, but for many of us, even more difficult is to give our time, to serve, to get down on the floor, take the towel, and to serve. Here's what we've discovered about healthy churches that really believe in serving. We just share a few things. And as we do, I want you to think through your own attitude, your own places of serving, how and where you serve. Let's talk about a few things. Here's what we discovered. Healthy churches, first of all, in healthy churches, everyone serves, not just pastors. It's easy to sometimes say, well, we're all busy, we've got jobs, and so we give and we hire pastors to do the ministry. That's really not what the Bible talks about. What the Bible describes in the church that Jesus has for us, it's not the pastor's job to do all the ministry, that really what we're to do is to equip and support and encourage and teach and equip all of us to serve. Because everyone serves, and the pastors lead the way and help everybody to successfully serve. So here's just a really specific example of that, right? We have a lot of folks who have served for years and years as part of a church family. But now as they're aging, they're homebound and not able to get out. And so they can't come worship as often. Some of them are living in assisted care facilities where they don't have a ride to church and they can't get to church. And it's really important for us as a church family to let them know we've not forgotten about you. We care about you. You have given so much, and we want to let you know that we know you, we care about you. And so we got to go, like the church needs to go out and visit. Well, a lot of churches say, well, let's hire someone to do that. And the result is we maybe, if you just take the pastors, maybe could visit everybody once a month. That's not all that great though, right? Like once a month, 12 interactions a year with your church family where you've served for so many years. So recently we started something brand new. We started a visitation program. Now we started it small so we can figure out how to do this before we roll it out like large scale. But let me tell you what's happened over the last several months. So Frida, who kind of oversees our visitation ministries, she and Shirley have taken Tuesday afternoons. And rather than Frida going by herself, she's taken Shirley, and Frida and Shirley have visited. I heard of one time where Frida and Shirley went and visited somebody else, took that third person, visited a fourth person. Why? Because we spread the joy and we share the joy with everybody. They had a great time together. Shirley's been doing this enough time with Frida. She's ready to take someone with her, and Frida has already lined up to take someone else, Diana, who's going to start going with her. And now we're going to be able to visit more and more people. Wouldn't it be great if rather than visiting all of our homebound assisted living folks once a month, we visit them once a week because we, the whole church, everybody goes and shares. You don't need a pastor to go visit somebody and pray with them. You can do that. And it means a lot when everyone serves, not just the pastors. In healthy churches, everyone serves, not just the pastors. In healthy churches, everyone serves where they are most gifted and most needed. God has given you incredible gifts and abilities that he wants you to use for service. You know how you know that? Because already today we have been blessed by an incredible group of worship leaders who have great musical abilities and gifts, and they have led us in worship, haven't they? You appreciate that? Yeah, for sure. You know, there's another way we could do it. We could say, all right, welcome to church, and we could draw 5 random names of people who are here and say, come on up, here's a songbook, lead us in worship. How's that going to work out? I'm like, I'm finding a different church. You don't want me to. That's not leading in worship. That's like, kill me now. Let's all go see Jesus because, no, I don't know. We need those who are most gifted to help lead us, right? And when that happens, we're all blessed. And so someone would say, well, that's not my gift, but I can find a place to serve. You know what, some of you are incredibly detail-oriented. Man, I hate details. Oh, they're so boring. But like some of you, you're incredibly detail-oriented. And you know what? We need detail-oriented folks to help count the offering every week. Because the bank doesn't really like it when we put a note in here that says, we think it's approximately this much, give or take $30, $40, and let the bank sort it out. They don't really like that, right? They like things to be down to the penny. And some of you crazy detail-oriented people who've been gifted with administrative details, you're the perfect people to do that. You use your gifts and abilities to do that so the bank loves us and we can have good accounting and not have chaos in board meetings. That's how God has gifted you, and you can use those gifts here at the church. Now, let's say on a given Sunday, Donna is, got her team and folks who are supposed to count the offering are gone and everybody else who's gone as well. And she's like, man, I really need someone. And she comes and finds you and says, hey, you're living, breathing, you look pretty smart. Will you help me count the offering today? And you're like, man, I am not detail oriented. You should see my checkbook. I have bank error, $10 just to keep myself, and it probably wasn't the bank error, but I think it was. It just keeps myself good so I don't get charged, I'm the wrong person to do this. I'm not detail oriented. I can't help you out. And she's like, I know. But today, look, we got to have 2 people count the offering. You understand why that's important, right? She said, just tell you what, I'll do the work. I'll write it down. You just watch what I do and make sure that everything gets written down, added up. All the money goes in the bag. No money gets put in anybody's pockets. And you sign and that'll work for today. It's not going to be your thing forever, but you can help today. You can understand the importance of that. You were like, all right, I can do that because I'll help and serve wherever I'm needed. Or if it is a matter of you find that something has been spilled and you're like, I'm not the janitor, not my job. It is your job. If you're in the place and it needs to be done, you grab a towel and you wipe it up. Why? Because we serve wherever we're gifted and wherever we are needed. That's part of what we do. Sometimes we use our giftedness as an excuse to not do things we don't like to do. Now, you probably shouldn't be serving every week, week in and week out for years in places where you are not gifted and it's a bad fit for you. But when the time comes up, we got to do what we need to do and serve, even if it's not our favorite thing to do, even when it's hard. Playing on the worship team, singing on the worship team, I've done it for several years. I'm not doing it now because it's not what I'm supposed to be doing now. It's fun. And if you're a musician, it's fun to play music with a good band. And it's easy to look and say, look, the worship team, they get to be up in front of people and they get to play music. What a great ministry that would be. It must be so much fun all the time. You know our worship teams, they get here like at 4 o'clock on Saturday night, and they give their whole Saturday night. And then they get here early on Sunday morning, and they give their whole Sunday morning. Our worship team, like, we're going to sing each of our songs like once today. By the end of a weekend, the worship team has sung every song probably like 5 or 6 times. Which means when you're still like, oh, I love that song, it's so wonderful, you only sing it once a month. They're singing it like time after time after time after time. And I've been on a worship team. There's songs I really like, and there's some songs like, it's just not my favorite song. And after a while, playing it over and over and over, I'm like, I don't even like that song anymore. But you know what? Our worship team members, they serve and they lead well. They give and they sacrifice, even if it's a song it's not their favorite. With a smile on their face, they worship Jesus, and they lead all of us worshiping Jesus, even when it's hard with songs they don't like. And worship team members, we appreciate that. That's what it means to serve, to put a towel on and do stuff that's not always fun. In fact, for some of you today, I'll just be honest, okay? For some of you today, when you go pick up your kids, you need to find Chelsea down in early childhood and say, put me on the schedule. I've been avoiding your phone calls because it's not fun, and I think I need a break for my kids, but you know what? December, January, and February, I'll do it for my kids, for the Lord, for my church family. Some of you don't even have kids anymore, and you think that you're out of that responsibility because you don't have kids in the program, but you know what? You need to go find Chelsea. You need to go find Randy. Fill in schedule to like down in the gymnasium with the elementary kids and say, you know what? December, January, and February, you can count on me. Every Sunday, I'll be there. I barely like kids, but you know what? I can love them with the love of Jesus, and I can smile. And when they wrestle and knock over the divider, I won't even yell at them. Bless Jesus, he's working in my life. Put me on the schedule. Because that's how family is, right? And we serve, and we put a towel on, we do things even when they're hard. Healthy churches recognize that servants don't retire, they get reassigned. It's easy to say, I've been doing that ministry for years and years and years, I need a break, and 10 years later, you're still taking a break. Man, it's time to get reassigned and re-engaged in ministry. Doesn't mean you have to do the same ministry for 80 years, but you find a new ministry. I have someone in our church family who says, you know what, I can't do everything I want to do right now because of physical limitations, but God has been teaching me that what I can do is I have a lot of time to pray. How can I pray for you? Now, sometimes people use prayer as an excuse and then don't actually do anything and feel good about it, but in this case, I know it's for real because he pulls out his notebook. When I share a prayer request, he writes it down, and I know that there's someone lifting me and my needs up before God. That is a ministry, and I so appreciate it. You don't retire, you just get reassigned. For some of you, it's time to get reassigned and start serving again. Healthy churches recognize that serving is not I have to, but serving is I get to. And yes, there are roles that need to be filled and jobs that need to be done, but it's not about a role, it's not about a job. It's I get to serve. Why? Because we keep it personal. Why? Because Jesus Christ is a person who is to be served and worshiped and honored. And every time I get down on the floor with those kids, even though it's hard and they may spit up on me, it's all right because I'm serving Jesus as I am serving this child. That Jesus is worth it, and he's told me to start serving, so I'm going to serve Jesus, and I make it personal. As I serve Jesus, I'm investing in the people around me, because ministry is always about people. Even when it's details and working behind the scenes, it's always about people. And I will invest in people because people are important, and people are worthwhile investments. And so I'll serve because I love Jesus, because I love people. And I'll get personal. I'm going to invest in the people around me. And so again, Jesus asks every one of us, so where are you serving? How are you serving? Where are you investing in people around you, even when it's not convenient? We want to make it as easy as possible for you. One of the jobs of the staff is to help facilitate easy transitions to find a place to serve. Here's a couple real specific things, and then we're going to be done, okay? So a couple weeks from now, we're already planning our ministry fair. You're going to see some of that on Sunday, November 5th, after both services, down in the gymnasium. We're going to have a bunch of our leaders there with tables and some pictures and examples. They'll have some handouts for you of jobs and job descriptions where we need people to serve. Like I've already shared a little bit about the kids ministry, but like our tech ministry, we need people to serve in the tech ministry. Every week we video one of our messages, and then someone stays after and edits it down and puts it on Facebook so people who aren't here can watch it and hear it. And you've been the recipient of that. Well, somebody's got to do that. Volunteers can do that. We need folks in our tech ministry. You know how important it is to serve behind a computer and to support the worship team putting words up on the screen? That's one of our ministries. That is a ministry that you've already been blessed by today, right? I mean, Cliff, he's one of our best, and he does it great, and we sing together, and the slides are always there with the right words right on time. That's a ministry. We need some folks who are willing to serve in areas like this. And so all of our ministry leaders, they'll be there. You can talk to them. You can find a place to serve. You can get plugged in. I want you to know of a benefit we have here at Ridgefield Nazarene. We've got 3 services every weekend, which means, yes, we have a lot of holes that need to be filled, but that is a huge blessing. You see, the little church I grew up in, we had 1 worship service. That meant everybody who served in the nursery missed out on the worship and teaching of that day. Those faithful volunteers who served in kids' church week after week after week went months without enjoying worship together. We don't have to do that. There's no reason you have to miss out on worship. I want to plant a phrase in your mind that I want us to use from here on out. Worship one and serve one. You realize that you're here like at 10:30 today, right? You could make a positive difference in somebody's life just by showing up a little bit early and giving your 9 o'clock hour to serving and then sticking around and worshiping at 10:30. Now you say, that's like doubles my commitment on Sunday morning. No, it doesn't. It really doesn't double it. Why? Because you're only going to drive here once and drive home once. All the drive time is only once. You're not doubling. You're just adding a little bit more, and the result is you get to invest in somebody's life. You think I'm kidding? This is a huge benefit that not everybody has the opportunity to be a part of. Worship 1 hour, serve the next hour. Worship at 9 o'clock, serve at 10:30. Serve at 9, worship at 10:30. Or if that doesn't work, you can come on Saturday night and serve and or worship, and then come, because you can only come for an hour on Sunday and then go home. That's the rule, right? Well, come do one on Saturday night and the other on Sunday morning. We've got so many options. It's an incredible blessing and opportunity. Worship one, serve one. That's how it happens. And Jesus asks us, where are you serving? How are you serving? And if I can't answer that question, I've got some work to do. No wonder I'm not growing spiritually like I want to. Jesus said, last thing he said, you will be blessed if you do them. There's a blessing that comes when we serve. There's a blessing we only receive when we're in giving mode, not in receiving mode. What would it be like for you to show up to church, not looking forward to what you can get out of it, but what you can give? You might experience a greater blessing. You will grow in your faith. You will connect with other people because you work side by side with them. Jesus asks, where are you serving? How are you serving? Worship team's going to come on back. We're going to close it out this morning, and I'm going to invite God to just really continue to work on our hearts. As they come back, let me just leave you with a little kind of a mental picture here. Another way to talk about church is to say that we're a family. My church growing up was my second family, was my extended family. They were family. Here's how family treats each other. When it's time for Thanksgiving, we're going to gather at somebody's house. The first thing you say is, what can I bring? What can I contribute? When you show up, you say, what can I do? You need to set up tables. You need to find chairs. Can I set the table? How can I help? When dinner's over and your family, you say, can I help wash the dishes? Can I put things away? Can I dry, rinse, or wash? We all help out. Okay, well, not everybody, right? There's always that one uncle. Oh, you have him in your family too, huh? That one uncle who always shows up empty-handed, but goes home with leftovers. How does that work out? He doesn't even have a bowl to put them in because he didn't bring anything, unless he brought an empty bowl for the leftovers. That he shows up right when dinner is served, so that he doesn't have to help set up the table or do anything. And somehow after dinner's over, there's really important things to be done, and he disappears when dishes are washed. He's the uncle who takes, and never gives. He's a little frustrating to deal with in your family, isn't he? Here's the deal. You don't want to be that uncle in a church family. Nobody wants to be that person. What if when we show up to worship, our attitude was not, what am I going to get out of this today? What if our attitude was, how can I serve? What can I do? Where can I help? Tell me what to do. I'm here to serve. Jesus says, you will be blessed. Stand with me. Let's pray. Let's seek God. God, Jesus, you're such a great example, and you showed us what you wanted us to do more than just tell us. So, Lord, help us to follow your example. Help us to not be content with a servant's attitude, but to find a place to serve. Lord, lead each of us to find our way to serve. And as we put the towel around our waist and we get down and we serve, Lord, I pray that you would open our eyes to the blessing that is. We are yours, Lord Jesus. We will follow you. We will imitate you. We will obey you. We are yours. You've already led the way. We will follow. Show us where. Show us how, Lord Jesus. In your name we pray. Amen. Let's raise our voices one more time. It has been so good to worship with all of you today. It's been great just to listen to the church family singing. Let's celebrate one more time as a commitment that we'll follow Jesus, we'll obey, we'll be the church that he wants us to be, and then let's go do. Lead us out, guys.